Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Boogie Board Tiki Bar. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Carla Wade, who is the Chief Revenue Officer at Lotlinks. Carla, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
Good, Kevin. How are you?
I'm doing well. Now, you have one of the more creative backgrounds that I've seen. Are you in an art studio or what's happening?
I'm actually in my home office, which is slash my workout room slash my art studio. I just created my own LLC not too long ago, and I'm just trying to see if maybe I can kick this thing around and see what happens. Retirement money.
Awesome. I love that. So you're a painter or what do
I
you do?
am mixed media mainly, yes, but it's oils, acrylics, collage, you name it, all sorts.
Have you always done that?
I've always been keen on it. And I think during the COVID years, like most of us, we were trying to either learn a skill or enhance a skill. And I started taking some serious lessons and a mastery program. And now the bug has been fully caught back on. So here we go.
Oh, well, good for you. I love that. Now, I always start with the same question of what you wanted to be when you grew up. I imagine an 8-year-old Carla, I don't imagine that you had aspirations of being a chief revenue officer in the automotive industry, maybe a painter. What was on your mind at that point?
I wanted to be a flight attendant so
Interesting.
badly. Jet setting across the world. I mean, and I've been flying since the age of 5. So when you're a little one sitting in that seat and you're looking up at them with the uniform and charging back and forth and telling people to sit down and buckle up, you kind of looked up to that. And that was my childhood dream.
I love that. What were you doing that you were flying at such an early age?
So my mother used to sing in a rock band in Europe when I was young, and so she traveled around quite a bit. And wherever the band laid their hat for a long period of time, I then at some point followed. So 5 countries later, and several years later, a few decades later, here I am settled in the US for quite some time now.
What was that like as a kid traveling around with a rock band? I would imagine both exciting, probably challenging to be in all these different countries. What memories do you have?
I definitely did not appreciate that until my later years. It was difficult. I mean, you're going to countries where they don't speak your native tongue, so fitting in was really hard. Always felt like the odd person out, so that was tough in the early years. But as I got into my adult years and started working, I found that that laid the road for me to be able to speak to, get along with
Mm.
any culture, any creed, race, you name it. I feel very comfortable in any room now because of that exposure as a child. So it definitely had its silver linings.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that. And so you're traveling all around, presumably living in different areas. What do you do for schooling once you decide you maybe don't want to be a flight attendant? How do you think about your secondary education?
Yeah, sure. So I wound up here in the States and, talking about going to college and pursuing a career. And of course, like many back in these communications it was like the new AI, right? Communications was it. Everybody wanted to be communications major. And that didn't quite unfold the way I expected it to either. And I had a cousin of mine who was working for Penske Automotive, and she was in quality assurance. Back then, it was really important to get the customer confidence and experience up. I don't know if you've ever heard, but buying a car has not always been the people's favorite thing to do. And so, in order to kind of change that narrative, dealerships became very, very, very ingrained in making a customer experience good and great, right? To allow people to come in and feel comfortable buying cars. And so the customer service aspect became really popular. And she said, you should join this. The auto industry is awesome. There's not a lot of, women that look like us there. And I think you would do great and, make money and find your footing. And the rest is history.
So what was the actual way in the door? Were you a customer service representative on the phone with clients? What was it actually like to get in?
So I remember I started with Mercedes-Benz Manhattan. So imagine this beautiful flagship store in the heart of Manhattan, New York. It was very exciting and the most beautiful machines you could ever be around all day if you had to. And I was an inventory clerk. So I was literally kind of building out customers' ordered vehicles and
Interesting.
tracking them as they came in, built from Germany, here to the States to be delivered. So I was doing that. And they would use me as a receptionist to relieve her for her lunch break and then work every Saturday at the reception desk. And I loved it so much. I was supposed to have Mondays and Sundays off. I worked Tuesday through Saturday. I loved it so much that I would work Monday through Saturday. I just wanted to be there every day. It was so much fun and so thrilling.
What about it was so much fun? That's you're presumably early teens at that point,
Hmm.
living in living in New York. There are other exciting things to do other than work 7 days a week at the dealership. What about it for you was like I can't get enough of this?
So I think there were several aspects, right? I think that the actual operation itself really intrigued me, just from how the whole process started from top to bottom, right? So you've got your sales reps, they sell the cars, they've got these books of business and their clientele. Sales managers are keeping everything on keel. It's a very strategic as to what inventory you keep, what you put prominently displayed on a showroom, when you might mark something down, when you take something to auction, things you would take in on trade, things you would refuse. It was the entire operation of it itself really fascinated me. And I was thirsty to learn more and to grow. There's no way I'm going to remain an inventory clerk or part time receptionist, right? So I think kind of sponging off of that and feeding my curiosities helped me then to kind of take my next steps up the rung of the ladder, if you will, to other things, so I could just get more involved.
And you did a number of things there. You spent a significant amount of your professional career at Mercedes Benz. So, what was that trajectory like? What were some of the next kind of excitements in your professional development?
So at one point, I saw myself as a sales rep there, right? And I really wanted to do that. They were the coolest folks. I mean, in their Armani suits, they knew everybody. And of course, in Manhattan, you had, the clientele went from Lauryn Hill to Donald Trump, right? It was
Mm.
any and everybody who was anyone in New York City bought cars from that store. So you never knew, who you're going to see or who could be your next client. And I wanted to sell there, and they were like, "Kid, you need to have a book of business before you can sell anything here, right? Go get your chops, get some experience, and come back and maybe we'll talk." So I said, "Okay, challenge, we're on." But because Mercedes Manhattan was the corporate store, I also had a foot into HQ, which at that time was in New Jersey. It's now in Atlanta. And an opportunity opened up there for me to do employee sales. So every employee got a company car, and so I was going to go there and handle the paperwork on the employee benefit side of things. And I got into MBUSA, and of course, everyone had a car from the CEO down. And so I met everyone in the organization. And I made sure that things were done right, things were done on time, I was communicating well. And from there, I kind of got sought out and asked to come join their organization or step up to their department, and got plucked for other gigs. So that was a fun time there too.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I would imagine a lot of visibility, potentially also a lot of risk in being the lead of
Sure.
the brand facing the internal employees. Do you remember? You said you kind of got into the sales arm of the business. The first time that you actually made a sale, or maybe just the first time that like, oh, this is clicking. Like I'm good at this. This is
Yeah.
working.
So it's funny because after I left MBUSA, I wound up back at the dealership some years later. And I remember, they put me at the desk and it was my first sale. And Kevin, you look much younger than me. So the rise of the internet had finally come upon us, right? And buying cars or inquiring about cars online was the new thing.
Right.
And they weren't quite sure how to manage this process, right? Like, how do you talk to these people? Like, you just pick up the phone. If they didn't leave you a phone number, you panicked because you couldn't speak to them, right? We weren't used to interacting this way. And I wrote the process for reaching out to these customers, the first line of defense as soon as a lead came in, what our first actions were, trying to get them to come into the dealership or selling the car purely online. And there were instances where that just started to flow. And people would come in and say, "Hey, talk to Carla," or "I'm here to see Carla." And they're like, "She doesn't sell." but I'd sold them already on coming into the dealership online, and kind of seeing the fruits of your labor that way too was really cool. But I remember this one particular sale that stands out to me, and it was high finance guy up on the upper west side, upper east side, sorry, because the east side of New York does not like to be on the west side of New York. So let's get that, like, you're either east or west. Let's get that straight, right? Never the twain shall meet. And so we were on the west side, and he was interested in, one of their really big, more than the $100,000 SUVs. And I got his number, and he's like, "Hey, I prefer text." Okay, no problem. So we're texting back and forth. What are the specs? What is this? This is what I want. This is what I need. It's got to have all these bells and whistles. This is my price point, right? So he and I are going back and forth negotiating on this car, and I thought I had to sell that day, and he started going quiet on me, and I was like, "Dang it, I think I may have lost him," right? And he's like, "I'm not stepping foot in that dealership. Like, don't call me. We're just doing everything via text." Now, what these days may seem a bit sketch, back in those days, I don't know if we were doing kind of the tech scams that they're doing nowadays.
Yeah.
So it was a lot more comfortable. So I remember that night I went out with my girlfriend because it was a Friday night. And we were at a nightclub. And, I'm dancing, having a great time, and my phone is going off. He is texting me in the middle of the night. And he's like, "Okay, this works. My wife is in, deliver it tomorrow." And I'm like, "My God, I just sold a car. I'm at a nightclub and I did it." So that's probably my most thrilling transaction ever.
I love that. I love that. I feel glad for your friend because that's just good energy to get from Carla. The
Absolutely.
next round's
Next
on
round's
her for
on
sure.
me.
Yeah, absolutely,
Exactly.
absolutely. How about the? Well, that's really interesting because I picture you maybe meeting some resistance when you're telling your boss or other senior people in the company, like, "No, I'm going to conduct this entire sale via text message, or I have this pattern of where I can actually interact with people online." Did you meet resistance internally?
Oh, of course. I mean, they're like, "Well, nothing goes anywhere until you have the deposit in house," right? So, of course. So they would not put the car on hold for me. I think there were only two in stock. And I'm like, "I'll be in tomorrow." Like, put it on hold. I don't know if you know anything about the auto business, but it does not sleep. So that's one thing. And they would not put the car on hold until I had, his credit card deposit, of course, and smart in their sense. But it went through. I mean, I jumped in the car. I drove to the east side to deliver it, and things went swimmingly. And he became like one of my best customers. Like, he bought maybe three cars from me during that process. But it was trusting the process, being available, being personable, right, and kind of catering to that, kind of serving the client the way that they wanted to be served. Sticking rigidly to a process does not always get you where you need to be. It taught me to be flexible, to be open-minded, to think outside of the box when it comes down to sales or creating a concept, because there's diversity in how people like to buy or how people like to interact too. So it's important.
I love that. I love asking former salespeople about their sales because they're so vivid in their
And
recollection
we love
of
to
those
talk about
stories.
ourselves.
Well, no, 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 it's not that. It's that you remember that there were only two left, right? You remember the exact details because it's
Yeah,
when you're in it, it's very heightening.
it is.
And you're building this craft. You're clearly getting good at it. You're moving up the ranks. When do you have your first transition into leadership experience, and what is that like for you?
Yeah. So I raised my hand. So at the time, Mercedes Manhattan was my first leadership gig, and the management there was amazing. We probably had some of the youngest sales management general managers, I think, that we've ever had, but just brilliant minds, and really forward thinking, right? Really innovative. And again, this rise of the internet thing came up, and I'm back there plugging away with a number of other reps. And I could see where some folks were just maybe not putting in as much effort or slacking off a little bit,
Mm.
or their response times were too slow. And so I raised my hand. I walked up to my then general manager and said, "Hey, let me run that department. I think that I have skills that I can impart on them. I can inspire them, motivate them to do more. but there's so much being left on the table here. And I want to take that off your hands. Let me manage that. And he gave me the shot, but I had to continue selling also. So I
Mm.
wasn't allowed to let go of one. And he said, do double duty for now. And if you prove yourself, then we'll take it from there. And that was really what started my entire career in building, leading, and managing teams until now.
What surprised you most when you say, okay, I've got these ideas, I've now got the responsibility of leadership. Did it work right away? Presumably there were some things that you did not foresee that were part of the new job description.
What surprised me was how hard it was, especially when, leading people is hard. It draws on a lot of different energies, and you really have to dig inside yourself to be a really good leader, I think. Right. And so here I am sitting with my peers who just yesterday we all did the same thing. And now today I'm kind of asking you to do stuff or to stop doing stuff. Right.
Yeah.
And that gets met with resistance. And I consider myself a lover, not a fighter. And so it was difficult for me in the beginning to try to create that tad bit of separation or get people to listen to what I'm saying without coming across as though, I was holier than thou or, knew it all, when of course I'm still learning too, right?
Yeah.
And then I knew that at that point I needed tools. I needed more resources. I needed help in people management. And then so I found a couple of mentors at the dealership that I really leaned on, that I admired. I admired the way that they led us, and how they behaved when there were issues, to teach me their ways. And slowly but surely, I feel as though I got to the point where I'm also paying that forward too.
So you have kind of this curiosity streak and also this positivity streak that says I want to take on these challenges. There's clearly risk in that, but you don't seem too phased by that. And then you're willing to just learn whatever is next to get to the next level. Where does that attitude stem from?
I don't know. I think that I'm a big picture person, right? So I've taken steps in my career where I've gone two steps forward and maybe even taken a step back, right? And regressed and made less money or took a lower role because knowing myself and the way I motivate myself, I'm never happy being in the same spot. I'm always going to look to elevate. But because maybe stepping back and going back to something was opening up a larger opportunity down the road. And so I think, fortunate enough to have that foresight. Tell me where it came from. I have no idea. But I'm not afraid to take risks. I know I will land on my feet. So if I try something and it fails, hell, I don't know if anyone's going to care about my art or buy any of it, right? But I'm going to try and give it a go. And if it all winds up on my own walls eventually, hey ho, I gave it a try. But I'm not going to let the fear of failing stop me. For me, a lot of my failures have been my fuel, right? Or my lessons, how not to or when not to. And so I embrace that. I embrace that. I'm okay with it.
I love that. I love that self belief is kind of you just know you'll figure it out. You got to be able to trust yourself to get to a certain point. And I think we're gonna sell some art later today on LinkedIn, so that'll be a good thing.
Let's go.
All right. So after a storied career with Mercedes, you actually shifted to automotive mastermind, and
Yes.
I want to know what intrigued you about that opportunity.
So, my then sales manager, young German man who came to Mercedes all kind of on an internship program, right? Wound up running the place. Just what a beautiful brain. He just, just so smart, so forward thinking, so avant garde, like thought outside the box, and a lot of fun too. Really good human. And so he left the company to go build his startup, right? All off an idea that the marketing that we were using or sending out at that time just wasn't hard hitting, didn't send the right messages, didn't look glossy, didn't really draw a customer in. And he thought of a better way to do it. And so him and one of his best buddies went out to create Automotive Mastermind. And they probably chased me for the first 4 years of, Mastermind's life. And mainly because startups was a very new concept. at that time. There was too much risk in my eyes in the beginning there. I mean, I'm at MB Manhattan, corporate store, company car, my own parking spot in New York City, like Queen Bee. I was happy. Um, and then one day we took on his software at the dealership. We signed up with Mastermind at the dealership. And that first month, when our marketing hit, the phones blew up, the door
Interesting.
swung open, folks were just coming in droves, and I was like, holy crap, this is good. So I called him up and I'm like, I want to come down. I want to talk to your product people. I have so many ideas, like how we could make this better, blah, blah, blah. I need to see this organization. And of course, I get down there and I wind up in his sales snares, right? You want to come join us. You want to come join us. And he said to me, "Listen, I know that you've built sales teams and call centers and so on several times now, and you've done it a couple of times for MB Manhattan. I need that here now. We're ready to grow legs. We're ready to go to market, and I want you to build me this team." And that to me was so intriguing and so exciting that I packed up my corporate job and went to my first startup, went to Mastermind, and we had a great time, great career. It's now part of S&P Global, so it did quite well for itself, and spent a good 6 years there building both the sales development team and the inside sales team.
So you now have a set of experience to draw from. You have a very different set of resources, I would assume, and different set of tools. How did you go about building the go to market motion there?
Yeah, so one of the things, the first things I leaned on was, you know, some of those star employees, right? So also a new concept for me back then was the ability to work remotely. I mean, at a dealership, you're in all day,
Yeah.
9 to 9, right? And so in my head, I'm like, how do you even trust someone to say that they're working, but you don't see them? They're not coming into the office, right? That takes real trust. And so I drew from my, phone book of folks that had worked for me in the past that I knew were great, I knew I could trust, and I knew were disciplined. And that kind of helped me start getting it going remotely. And then finally, we just started interviewing folks and getting them to come into the office and cultivating that office and growing it as we go. And I mean, we lost a lot, along the way, but we gained a ton too in the process. But it starts with the people, and then the process for sure.
So it sounds like quite the ride. You're a customer of the software first, so you obviously know its potential, but then you're lured away once again, and now you are the chief revenue officer at Lotlinks. So I'm hoping you can tell me how you ended up here.
Yeah. So, you know, I had been at Mastermind for about 6 years now and was not looking, right? Just on my normal grind, happy at the company and so on. And I get headhunted. And, there's this thing, and I tell my employees today, right, that you should be looking every once in a while. You should seek out to see how marketable you still are. You should brush up on an interview skill. You should look and see what's out there. I think it's healthy, right? Not only for yourself, but also to see like what you're worth. And they reached out to me, didn't tell me who it was with, some recruiter, and I was intrigued. And I was like, oh, that feels nice, right? LinkedIn, someone reaches out and says, "Hey, we want to talk to you. We think you've got what it takes to fill this role we're trying to fill." And I'm like, okay, I'll talk. And one conversation led to another and another and another and another. And I think that I was courted for about 4 months at Lotlinks, but I met everyone from at the time their chief sales officer, the CEO, the founders, the financial officer. And every conversation I had was just so rich. And I had the opportunity then to see the technology and how cutting edge it was and how it was using artificial intelligence and machine learning. Mastermind leaned a lot on behavior prediction with their AI. So this was like another way of spinning AI. And I got enamored. I got glamorized, if you will, by the product itself. And then, the invite, the challenge to come in and build. another sales team, right? Which I knew I could do, no problem, and do it for this company instead, and then help build on their culture, right? Help build their culture up, and that's really what drew me to Lotlinks in the beginning.
I'm concerned you're not going to be able to retire and become an artist. I think there's too much enthusiasm in your voice about this. I can just tell. You can just tell when someone is just has the passion for it, and I love that. I want to understand. You mentioned this, and I've worked with companies in the automotive space, large vehicle manufacturers, those at the ground floor at the dealership level, and it's an extremely male dominated industry.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think about that when you look at what you've been able to achieve, things that have been put in your way to meet that success? How do you think about that from an industry perspective?
Yeah. And in the beginning it wasn't easy, right? So I've applied for positions even when I was at MBUSA and was told no, and then some guy gets the job, right? And a
Mm,
lot of times, I mean, kind of organically, this was how things were done, right? It's you lean on the people you knew, or folks that looked like you, or folks that had similar backgrounds that you felt like you could commiserate with, and it was difficult, and you almost have to stand out a little bit, right? So I remember talking about mentorship back in the day. I remember I was being led by a wonderful female manager, and she'd said to me, I didn't see you do X the other day. And I was like, I was just letting my work kind of speak for itself, and just someone will see I'm doing good stuff and come and pat me on the back, and I'll get my kudos. And she's like, no, like, you need to make yourself seen. You need to show folks the merit and the leverage of your work, and not in a braggy way, but you need to be able to sit down and show folks what you are doing, show your results, right? And I think a lot of women tend to sit back and wait for someone to bring us our flowers, as the kids would say, right? Instead of speaking up what we can do or our accolades. It feels foreign. And slowly, I kind of learned to do that, and I would get recognized. And I've had amazing men behind me being my mentor and being the kind of the leverage to give me a seat at the table. And then once you get that seat, like, recognize where you are and be open now to provide the seat next to you for the next woman coming up. I think, back when I first started in automotive, it was rare to see a female GM. It was rare to have things like women being recognized in automotive.
yeah,
And now there are groups, there are communities, there are a myriad of female, GMs and GSMs that are out there, and owners that are rocking it. Female technicians now are also on the rise, and it's just a beautiful thing to see.
I love that. And I wanted to ask you about that because your career is in the auto industry, but you're circling all the different areas of it, and you're now um, having a product that focuses on the dealerships, from what I can tell on online, and it's pretty cool technology. I was playing with it a little bit from a research standpoint. Do you think back to you as that inventory clerk, receptionist, and think like, oh wow, this is actually my customer today, is still this person? Do you have moments like that?
Yeah, all the time, all the time. And it's funny how so much has changed, and yet sometimes so little has changed, right?
Mm,
Um, I just feel so passionate about the business and helping dealers be successful, that I understood the obstacles that they would face while they're in the dealership, not having resources like ours, not having tools that are AI backed. I mean, there's a myriad of great vendors out there nowadays, and there's so much you can do. But I know it's a daunting task for a dealer who, maybe doesn't understand it all, or is not sure which one is the right one. How do you choose? Everyone says they're the best, right? How do you choose which one to invest in? But, it's great that the industry is starting to come around and starting to really leverage technologies and AI in their dealerships, where it's becoming a lot more commonplace, and adding now efficiencies. back and putting the dealers back in control of these
Mm,
efficiencies to maybe they don't have to work so hard anymore, right? Maybe now they get a little bit of work life balance or a little bit of help or a little bit of insight to help them run their dealership smoother, easier, and more profitably. And I'm excited about being able to help them.
that's amazing. I got one final question if you have time for it. So, someone hears this interview, they see Carla rising the ranks at Mercedes, cool company car, I imagine, then jumping to startup land, becoming an executive at a couple different places, now a chief revenue officer. What advice would you give them if they say, "Hey, that's a pretty cool story. I think that's something I'd like to do."
Um, hey, I mean, I guess I got here from working hard, being curious and taking risks. Everyone's path or journey is different, right? But it is nothing's impossible. I would have never ever thought walking into MB Manhattan and picking up the phone and transferring calls that I would be running a 76 person commercial organization where there's rev operations and enablement and all these moving pieces and be chief of anything, right? I never ever would have imagined that for myself, but the opportunities are absolutely there. Dedicate yourself to it, be curious, ask questions. If you want it, there's ways to get there. And I would say join communities. I'm a member of, Women in Revenue, Pavilion. Gosh, there's so many. Chief, there's so many. Join some of these communities. They're available on LinkedIn. They're easy to find. They're easy to get in. And you can talk. You can talk to other folks that maybe have the same aspirations or have been in the same shoes that can help you with leverage as well. There's just so much support out there. I would say lean on that and believe in yourself.
Carla, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your journey with us and some insights for our audience here. We'll of course post all that we can about Lotlinks in the notes, and we'll also post about the art because I think that's awesome. But I just really enjoyed it. So thanks again.
Same here, Kevin. Thanks for the opportunity.